Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Xony, and today we're going to have some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further, let's go. Now let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. My wife and I have been together for 16 years. We were high school sweethearts, and she was the only woman that I had ever been with. We started dating our sophomore year of high school, and we had hardly been apart for more than a week since then. I got a job at my father's company right out of college, and we have been working to build up our life ever since. We have 3 children together, a lovely home, a vacation house, and just about everything else you could want. My wife and I got along very well. I've always thought she was perhaps the funniest person I've ever met. We got a kick out of each other, and I thought that the heart of our marriage was the relationship we had as friends. Our families liked each other as well, which was something we both thought was important before we got together. The only issue in all of this was that my wife's best friend didn't always like me. She had been close with her friend, let's call her Kim, her entire life. It was almost like they had one brain at times. When my wife and I first started dating in high school, Kim almost seemed to be possessive of her time. I thought at times that it seemed like Kim was jealous of the time that I was spending with her. Now that we're adults, things have changed, and there isn't any hostility between us. But I wouldn't call us friends either. Kim is the godmother to our children and an important part of my wife's life, so I put up with the occasional side-eye from her because I wanted my wife to be happy. I trusted that my wife always had my best interest in mind and wouldn't let Kim talk her into anything. One thing that Kim would always joke about with my wife was how I was the only man she had ever been with. She would make jokes about how my wife didn't actually know if I was good in the bedroom because I was all she ever had. She would just make little comments like that intended to get at me. Kim had never married and she had several boyfriends over the time that I knew her. She would always tell my wife about the things that they would do together, and she was very open about her intimate life. What bothered her most about her was that she was not a good husband. What bothered her most about her was that she was a good husband. Me about it was that my wife would ask a lot of questions. She seemed to be a little too invested in what was happening. I asked my wife about it one day because my insecurities about it had taken over. I asked her if she regretted only ever being with me. She told me that she didn't, and I was silly for thinking it, but it was still something in the back of my mind. About 6 months ago, I started to really notice that there was something off about my wife. She was acting distant, and that wasn't like her. She was spending more time out of the house with Kim than she was at home with the kids and me. Now she was a stay-at-home mom, and I kind of figured that she was just going a little stir-crazy. I thought that she might have just wanted to get away for a little while and have some time to herself, so I let her have that. I made sure she was doing okay. I checked in with her to see if there was anything that I could do to make her feel better, but she just told me that she was fine. One night she told me that she was going over to Kim's house and that she would be back in a few hours. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just focused on spending time with the kids while she was away. She didn't end up coming home until around 2 in the morning. The entire time that I knew her, I had never seen her come home that late. She was always home before or around midnight, and if she was much later than that, she would let me know. When she got in, I asked her about where she was because I was worried. I had expected her to be home around 9 or 10 o'clock, and she was much later than that. We got into a little bit of an argument because she thought I was being very demanding about wanting to know where she was. I tried to explain that I was just worried and I didn't care, but I was about to call the police and drive around looking for her. We ended up just going to sleep and talking about it in the morning. She apologized for getting into an argument with me, and we carried on from there. After 16 years of marriage, our intimate life did take a bit of a downturn. It wasn't like it was when we were newlyweds, that's for sure. Still, we would have intimate at least once a week. After a few weeks, I noticed that my wife and I hadn't been intimate with each other. I thought back and there were a couple of times where I tried to initiate something and she turned me down. I was worried that there was something wrong with the marriage at that point. I figured that our intimate life disappearing might have been a sign of something else that I wasn't seeing. I talked to my wife about it a couple of days after the thought struck me. I told her that if there was something going on, I wanted to work through it and I was willing to do whatever it took to do that. If that meant going to marriage counseling every night of the week, I would do it. I loved her and I didn't want to be with anybody but her. She told me that there weren't any problems and that she just wasn't feeling like herself. A few weeks passed and I noticed that she was getting very sketchy around her phone. She bought one of those screen protectors that blacks out the screen if you look at it from the side. She changed her passcode and she almost never let it out of her sight. She had never been like that with her phone before. In fact, she had previously been so careless with it that she would leave it behind when she would go to the grocery store. At that point, I started to suspect that there was something on the phone that I needed to look at. One afternoon while she was taking a nap, I grabbed it to figure out what the issue was. She changed her passcode, but the fingerprints on the screen aligned with 4 numbers when I went to unlock it. As soon as I saw what they were, I knew she used our middle child's birth year as the passcode. I got in without an issue. When I looked through the phone, I found some very alarming things. The first thing I noticed was that in her photo gallery, there were a few very recent pictures of her body in tight outfits and a bikini. Alongside that, I found a few screenshots for men's Tinder profiles. Right away, I looked through the apps she had on her phone and I didn't see Tinder. I checked the App Store. And it showed that she owned the app, but didn't have it downloaded. She was being very secretive about using it. I ended up downloading it again and was able to get in using her Apple ID and a text message verification. From what I gathered, she was downloading it every day and logging in to check messages, then deleting it again. In her profile, she specified that she was looking for a discreet hookup and nothing more. The pictures I'd seen of her were being used as her profile pictures. There were dozens of younger men reaching out to my wife and telling her how good she looked. She was flirting with them and had even given some of them her real phone number. I checked her text messages and I found several muted conversations with unsaved numbers, where she was sexting, role-playing, and exchanging nude photos with several men. What disturbed me the most with all of this was how well my wife was hiding it. She had taken a lot of steps for her affairs to be as discreet as possible. It had been going on for months and from the messages I could tell, she had met up with at least 2 different men in person. The first one was the night that she came home around 2 a.m. and told me she was at her friend Kim's house. The following morning, the man sent a message to my wife asking her if she wanted to do it again, but she never replied. The other guy she met up with shocked me. They had been having elaborate conversations about different kinks and my wife mentioned wanting to try bondage. According to the conversation, they met up so she could try that. They continued talking after they slept together and it looked like they were planning to meet up again. I was heartbroken seeing all of that. I loved my wife and I thought we were happy, but I was clearly mistaken. I didn't understand how she could do something like that to me. I continued looking through her phone and of course, I found out that Kim encouraged her to cheat. Kim was telling her about something she had been doing with one of her boyfriends and my wife mentioned how she didn't feel comfortable asking me about it. Kim suggested she consider opening up the marriage since my wife wasn't satisfied, but my wife said that I would never go for it. Kim basically convinced her that if I didn't open the marriage, my wife's only option was to cheat. I put the phone back and I spent the night on the couch in the basement because I couldn't stand to be around her. I didn't know what to do. She was my world and it had been taken from me in an instant when I found out what she had done. I hated her for what she did and I wanted to make her pay for ruining our marriage. I thought about it all day the following day at work. Finally, I had a great idea. I told my wife that it would be fun to have a double date with Kim and her new boyfriend, so she jumped at the opportunity to schedule one. We hired a babysitter and I made reservations at a nice restaurant downtown. When we got there, my wife was surprised to see that there were 6 place settings. She thought that there must have been a mistake with the reservation, but she didn't question it too much. We ordered our drinks, and shortly after we sat down the others arrived. My wife's face completely dropped when the men she cheated on me with walked in. She was speechless. She had no idea what to say. The night before I went into her phone and texted both of them, telling them to meet her at the restaurant before they hooked up again. Both of them were very eager to go. One of them asked what was going on and stood at the end of the table, very confused. I asked him if he knew that he was sleeping with a married woman. He was speechless and just looked at my wife for answers. My wife tried to tell them to leave because they had nothing to do with her actions. She had withheld a lot of the truth from them. Kim and her boyfriend saw that we were obviously having our own thing and tried to leave. I stopped them before they could and made sure the boyfriend knew that Kim was the one who recommended that my wife cheat. He was a little disturbed by that. They started arguing with each other while my wife yelled at me for embarrassing her. The men tried to apologize and explain that they didn't know. I didn't fully believe them because she was asking for a discreet hookup. Who does that if they're not cheating on someone? We had been married for 16 years. There was nothing she could have asked me for that I would have looked at her differently. If she was interested in BDSM or anything like that, I would have tried it if it would have made her happy. Everything she was saying was a load of bull. One of the staff at the restaurant came to our table and made us leave because we were causing a huge scene. My wife stormed out after people started staring at us. Her face was beet red and she looked like she was about to cry. The cherry on top of it all was that people were recording the fight. She tried to explain everything to me when we got home. She said that there were things she was always curious about, but she was too afraid to ask me about them. So she looked for other men to take care of it for her. She begged me to forgive her and promised to be more open with me in the future. I found a divorce attorney the very next day. Now my wife and I are divorced and currently going through custody hearings with our children. I want nothing to do with her and also it's been difficult. I ended up selling the house so I could buy the condo that I'm living in now. She's living with Kim, who is also now single because her boyfriend didn't like that she ruined our marriage.